Dudes, welcome back. Sorry, it's been a hot minute since we've had any Billy content out there for a while. I know you guys are all clamoring, right? Sorry, joking. Welcome back. We're gonna do a shop talk episode today. I've got some cool videos in the works. I've got some cool videos in the works that just sort of need to be edited, but it's just, life's been crazy this year. It's pretty wild. Usually it's kind of slow in the first quarter in my world. And this year it is just kind of insane, which I'm not complaining about, which, again, if you guys are interested in following my Second Life project, check out LM Cases. Look, swag. Check out our Instagram page. It's LM_cases. That's what's going on. And we have YouTube also. Check out LM's YouTube. It's just called LM Cases 1985. That's what we've been up to. So anyway, also I gotta apologize. I'm not sick, but I'm getting over something, and I just have this kind of ridiculous cough that just comes out of nowhere. So if that happens, there'll be some editing and post-production that might be a little bit weird. But anyway, how you guys doing? I haven't talked to you in a while. I figured that I would use this opportunity to do a shop talk episode. I'm in the middle of mixing a record for my friend, and I've got a lot of printing to do this evening, so I figured I would just do a shop talk episode while I'm waiting for stuff to export and to print. So I figured I would do today's episode about the Eventide H9000. I figured let's use this as a year in review video. Also, you know me, there has to be a rant if it's a shop talk episode, right? Okay. H9000, year later. This is the most expensive piece of gear I've ever bought in my history of buying audio equipment. A year later, is it worth it? Yes. Yes, it is. It is a beautiful piece of gear. It sounds absolutely incredible. It does things that I can't emulate with a plugin, which is generally that's my theory. If I'm going to spend money, especially if it's an outboard thing, will it make my mixes sound better if I buy X thing? That could be a plugin, that could be hardware. Will it make my mixes sound better? And the answer is yes. It does a thing that I can't emulate in the box. That being said, it's a quirky bird. There's two things that are against it, man. It's one is it's expensive. You know, there's no sugarcoating that. It definitely is. It's certainly not meant to be a flex in any way that I spent money on this thing, but it's just like, it took me a couple of years to be like, buy this thing. What else can you buy for $7,000? You know, so it's a quirky bird, man. It's kind of weird. So excuse me, sorry, cough thing. I'm just getting over this being sick. So I'm gonna flip the camera around. Not that you guys are, I know you're gonna be super sad with not seeing this beautiful face, but I'm gonna show you just some of the how should we say, the quirks and features of the H9000. So stand by. Okay, so when you boot up the old H9000, it basically is controlled by this plugin program called Emote. Now, this lives on your computer, or it can be run as a VST. So the way that the H9000 is configured is it's essentially a reverb processor and a audio interface all in one. So the way that this is connected is that there is a USB 2.0 A to B cable that connects it to the computer, okay? And within it, there's a 16 in, 16 out audio interface. So basically what you do is you set up a stack of effects. So basically it's called an effects chain. And then you can have up to 4 essentially effects within an effects change. And basically the way that gets in and out of the computer digitally is that you use the Eventide H9000 as an ASIO driver. So because you have 16 ins and outs on it, you can configure outputs 1 and 2 to be an analog output that goes to your speakers, and then you can use 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. as the effects chain. So that's how I have this wired. So basically, In my studio, the way that it's wired right now is that the Eventide is connected to my network via an Ethernet cable, and it also has a USB 2.0 that goes to the computer. Now, in my mixing setup, when I'm mixing in the box, I use universal audio stuff. So right now, the Apollo is my main interface. The satellite that you're looking at right here is just for hosting VSTs. It's only just to work on the UAD platform for plugins. So all of the audio in out goes to the Apollo. So the everything that happens digitally in the computer goes to the Apollo, and then it has the D to A, and then it goes to my speakers, which are controlled by the PreSonus central station. So I know what you're thinking. It's complicated. How do you get the audio with the Eventide? So the analog outputs 1 and 2 of the Eventide go to the inputs of the Apollo. And then, so basically, the Eventide H9000 is the main interface, and then its outputs are just going into the Apollo. The Apollo is doing nothing except hosting plugins, and then its output just hits the central station, which I know is an extra layer that you don't need. I can easily take the H9000 and go right into the central station. I'm fully aware that that is an extra step. So anyway, the problem that I'm having with this is, and kind of with the I should say the quirk of the H9000, is that its clock is very funky. Okay, so in a perfect world, you would have a Big Ben or something like that. You know, the computer slaves to the Big Ben, the H9000 slaves to the Big Ben, any of the Universal Audio gear slaves to the Big Ben, as it would be a couple of years ago. But now with AVB and just different digital programming or protocols and things like that, the clock is over the USB stream, and you know the ability to externally clock a lot of equipment is kind of funky. So if you don't clock your Eventide H9000 correctly, you get this error here that's called USB audio mute is on, and that will disable all of the audio in and out of the H9000. Now you might be thinking, well, is that what is the big deal about all of that, and how does that work? So basically, the clock in the H9000 needs to be the same sample rate as your recording project, which is pretty simple, right? Like that's not anything that's out of the ordinary. That's basic digital gear talking to each other. The problem is if you're used to working in, so for example, my studio works in 4824. All of my sessions are done in 4824. That's what I ask stuff to come into. And I would say that that's probably 99.99% of all of the recordings that happen are in 4824. I got a session in last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, that was 44.124. So as soon as that came in, the H9000 completely freaked out and said, that's not the right sample rate, which obviously is. So the way that you have to slave or get the H9000 to sync up to your computer if you ever have to change the sample rate is you have to change the sample rate in your DAW to something different from what it is. So because we're used to working in 4824, the fact that a session came in 44.124 meant that I had to toggle the recording session to 48. I had to go into the H9000 and toggle that to another sample rate, say 88.2. And then we had to go back into Nuendo, toggle that to 44.1, and then we had to toggle the H9000 to 44.1. Are you confused yet? I know that that's super confusing because it took me a whole minute. It took me a minute to really figure that out. So the clocking back and forth between the two aren't very stable. Now, the session that I'm working on right now came in at, wait for it, 96.24. So because I don't really want to deal with a 98 or a 96.24 session for 15 songs, I downsampled that all to 48.24. But for whatever reason, in this world right now, it is really freaking out the H9000 and the Universal Audio Apollo. So when we come over like this, we'll go full circle back to getting started, okay? So this is, my H9000. It's called Billy's H9K. We'll toggle this so that it connects. And then you get this menu that says, the DAW project holds state data for Billy's H9000. Would you like to restore it? The answer, of course, is yes. We'll load that. And then you get this error message. Audio has been muted because the sample rate of the computer does not match the H9000. To use USB audio, first set the sample rate to the H9000 and set your computer to the same rate. Okay, so that is showing you what I just described. Now, to put into perspective what you just saw, this recording session is 4824. The clock on the H9000 here is set at 48K. So even though the sample rate in the session is 48K and the H9000 is set to 48K, I'm going to have to toggle the audio in this session to 44.1, or, because it's just easy. And then I have to toggle the H9000 to 44.1. And then I have to toggle Nuendo back to 48K. And then if I go back to that, to the H9000 and put that to 48K, it will then work. That sucks. Okay, Eventide. I got to tell you, I'm an absolutely huge Eventide fanboy. And that is a nightmare to deal with. And it is completely arbitrary. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But it's really a pain when you're going in to do recalls and you have to deal with that, which takes about 5 minutes to get your session up and running. That's a strike against the $7,000 reverb. The other thing that's a little bit of a strike against the $7,000 reverb is it just sort of does things on its own sometimes. So within the emote software, this has brought up our stacks. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are 4 effects chain. And you say, Billy, there's 3 right there. Yes, that is true. We are getting an error message on one of them that is just deciding not to load for some reason. Okay. Now, the other day, I made a bit of a how shall we say, a blunder. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm just going to toggle this out of my presets because I use pretty much the same effect stacks for everything. So, looking at this, it's an H3000 micro pitch, a shimmer reverb. I use the RMX reverb simulator, and I use another one called Bigger is Wider, which are really cool. Now, again, this has nothing to do with the sound. The sound is absolutely unbelievable. It is just the integrating it with a DAW, which is just a bit of a pain. So if you go and look at the unit here, you go into what's called sessions, and it basically just brings you up. Sorry for putting my finger in front of the lens there. It basically just brings you up recalls or files, just like a digital console would. So all you have to do is, if I want to hit up Billy's Greatest Hits, you just do that. There's some other stuff, and it just brings you up into your stack. Now, I've been using this processor for a year, and I've used it on pretty much every session for a year. And Emote, this is the software and the back end of the computer that you're looking at right now, has historically always recalled everything fine. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to another stack with 4 effects banks. And we'll see, and I'll toggle it back to my own. We'll see if the other one appears. Well, it doesn't. And as a matter of fact, when you do that, it erases the emote data. So in the middle of a mix, which I shouldn't have done, which is stupid on my part, I completely admit that, I had to rebuild my effects chain stacks, which is just kind of a bummer. So the other thing that's happening, so let's look at this session as an example. So right now, I can't even really play this for you because the sample rates aren't matching, even though they're the same. One of the other things that's happening recently on this session, which hasn't happened for the rest of the duration of anything that I've ever mixed before, is that something is happening with the Universal Audio Control software. Whereas input will show up here, meaning that the H9000 is spitting its analog audio output, except no output will happen on the Universal Audio Control. And when you try to boot up the control app on the Mac, it will just crash. And it will crash so hard that it will take a day or so for it to come back. So no audio output, whether the H9000 is connected or not. It's just very, very quirky. I've reached out to UA about some support on that, and they are just, I don't know if they're just not understanding or it's a combination of them not understanding the setup, but the fact that the Eventide has an ASIO driver in it, it just says, well, you can't use that. It's like, well, first of all, Eventide has a demo online using the H9000 with the Universal Audio stuff, and they're doing it exactly the way that I'm doing it. So it's that excuse of it's not working, and they're just kind of saying dumb things like, well, what brand of Thunderbolt cable are you using? Well, I'm using an Apple brand. Well, is it plugged directly into the computer? Yes, it's plugged directly in the computer. I'm saying that I have a clock issue, and it's crashing this. What's the problem here? There are a bunch of relays that click randomly in the Apollo. Like, there's something happening. So again, one of the reasons why I like doing these YouTube videos a lot is because I can reach out to you guys who are intelligent human beings and can say, hey, did you try this? So, all right, comment section, do your thing. Looking for some help here. Now, again, reality, as I prefaced in the beginning of the video, is I can absolutely bypass the Apollo, get it out of the chain, and just put the H9000 right into the the central station. It'd be fine. The problem is I have 8 cores in my satellite and 4 cores in the Apollo, so I'm using a good majority of those cores. And if I get rid of the Apollo in the chain, I have to rethink some of my plugins for a session that I'm midway in. So it just makes things a bit tricky. So again, that's the saga of tech support right now in the session. So we'll recap this now. So, year in review. I would say that the H9000 is a 90% win, but ooh, that 10%. That 10% when it doesn't want to work is such a pain in the butt. It really is kind of forcing me to rewire the studio to use it in its analog state. You still get the recall in the analog state, but it just is it needs to be the core interface of your studio if you're using it, which is kind of a bummer. One of the things that really put it over the edge to make me want to buy it is that you can recall it. I am a firm believer that in a good majority of the time, analog gear does sonically sound better. It just does. It just behaves differently than a plug-in. I hate to beat the drum of analog because really I've made really good sounding. I've mixed really good sounding sessions with digital for almost my entire career of being a recording engineer. I didn't get analog until the past 2 years, but I can tell you that it kind of sounds better. But I find myself not really caring that it sounds better because recall is a pain. And that's a real thing. If you're mixing a session, like right now I'm mixing a record that has 15 songs on it. I don't want to go back and make a recall sheet for everything. Some of the revs that we have are, ooh, I don't like the tuning that's on this. Can you tune this differently and that kind of stuff? And to go back and recall, a full analog session, that's a pain, man. I don't want to deal with that. So I'll take any sonic, I don't even want to say degradation, but any sonic difference between an analog processor and a digital processor. Digital wins for recalls always. That's coming from somebody with a analog console sitting behind me. In the box will always win, which again, one of the reasons why I bought the H9000 is that you can digitally recall it. So it's handling processing outboard. The computer's not handling anything, but with the computer, it's handling a digital recall, which is amazing. It's really good. That's the only miss is it's just, you go to boot the thing up and it just doesn't sync with the computer, and you have to go through this whole thing of changing the sample rate on your project. And then, it's innuendo, at least it says, would you like to convert the audio? And it's like, well, no. Do you want to keep it in the same sample position? No, it's don't touch it. I just need to toggle the time. That alone is really, really a pain. I hope that Eventide rectifies that. And it's seemingly random. It's in the world of the digital studio, how you power up, with digital devices so that they can all sync and, for lack of a better term, do its DHCP thing, in a networking, if you want to use networking example, just so that everything syncs and the IPs are good and all that kind of stuff. That's my biggest complaint with it is just, regardless of how you turn it on, some days it just decides that it doesn't want to work. And that's a problem. If you're a commercial mixer like me, who it's like, okay, I don't get paid until I get this out. That's a bit of a miss. The emote software is a bit quirky. It just sort of is. Routing is a little weird. It's definitely hard to get your brain around it. It does come. The H9000 does come with a manual. Look at this. It's a real book of a manual, and it is a little cryptic. So, as an example, when I got this thing, I got it in December of 2022. It probably took me until the end of January to have enough patience to sit down and figure out how to get audio out of the thing. It's very, very difficult. And as a matter of fact, I owe you guys videos on that. I've been really wanting to make videos on how to use this thing. Because really the only videos that exist on it are videos from Eventide, which are just basically getting you through plugins and stuff like that. And, YouTube reviewers who get it sent to them for free and extol its values kind of thing. So, I mean, again, my general theory on gear, and I know you guys probably know this, is I try to be not a snob. I have the pieces of gear that I like to work with, but I'll make music on anything. I hate mixing on Yamaha consoles, but I'll mix on them. I don't have a problem with it. If that's what the venue has, I'll use it. I don't like it, but it's my own personal preference. I really hate, back in the day of gear sluts / gear space, I really hate, when I was a young recording guy and I was building my studio in my parents' basement and just trying to put all this stuff together, I really hated going on those forums and being like, you cannot possibly use an SM57 on a snare drum, and there's just all these guys who are just grumpy, and I hate that stuff. I try to give it to you guys as real as I possibly can, so that if you're going to spend money on something, is it worth it? And I'm a firm believer in, I have the gear less bad, I know you guys probably do too, and it's just sometimes I just get fixated on, well, I have to buy this thing, it's going to be amazing. And then I get it, and I'm like, And then I have a firm rule. If I buy something and it satisfies, it scratches the gear lust itch, and it doesn't immediately make me go, whoa, this is unbelievable, I sell it immediately. I put it on eBay, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000 or $2,000 on a box. I just want to make sure that it's good, and it improves the quality of my sound. Microphones are the same way. I always joke, it's like, does a 421 sound much better than an E604? Not really. Do I own 421s? Yes. Does it sound much different? No. So if you're going to spend money, if you have a finite amount of money that you're going to spend on your studio, on your mixes, on your live rig, just make sure that it's not snake oil that you're buying. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to make this year in review is to just talk about the quirks of it. I mean, again, I paid full price for that thing from Eventide. It's not sponsored in any way. They don't owe me anything. I don't owe them anything. I'm a huge fan of Eventide. I think that company absolutely changed the way music sounds. I am a huge fan of the H9000. Again, don't let my review of its quirkiness sway you to think that I don't like it in any way. I will have that box until I die. It's amazing. I think it's really cool. I did spend the extra money and buy the one with the screen, and I'm glad I did. My logic behind buying the one with the screen is, if for whatever reason you have sync issues with the computer, or you want to take it live, or, I just thought that software compatibility would be an issue. They have a version called the H9000R, which is cheaper, and it doesn't have any of the front panel controls. It just has 2 USB ports and a power button. And the back is the same, but you don't get the screen or any of the buttons. And I just kind of had this idea of like, oh my God, what happens in three versions of Macs from now when they don't, when they don't support it or something like that. I have this, $8,000 paper or $7,000 paperweight. So I would urge you to, if you are thinking about buying one, just spend the extra cash and buy the screen, in for a penny, in for a pound at that point, which hilariously enough, there are a bunch of H9000Rs that are on the used market. There are very few H9000s with the screen. And again, my logic was, I don't know, if I buy this thing and it doesn't really make my mixes sound that much better and I want to sell it, at least it's the more expensive one and I can probably dump this thing if I need to. But again, I certainly have no intention of doing that. The software is a little quirky. But, looking at it, that's something that can probably be solved with a firmware update. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that I'm sure that they probably didn't make thousands of these things. I'm sure the numbers that are out there are probably in the hundreds. So, not only is it expensive, it's outboard gear. So, who is using outboard gear in the year of our Lord 2024? So, I don't think very many people. Or maybe more people than you think. I don't know. But, they're not making thousands and thousands and thousands of these. So, I would guess that beta testing is just guys like me saying, it'd be really kind of cool if you could change this. So, anyway, any help that you guys can offer me with the Apollo situation is good. I'm probably going to dump that thing and just get a satellite. Really, just use my Motus as my main interface, or switch it over between A and B so that the H9000 is the main interface and it goes right in the central station. Anyway, that's another video. I know that this one was long and kind of rambly. I hope that if any of you are looking for H9000 questions and you happen to stumble upon this video, just leave a comment below if you're still watching at this point. I know this is long too. Again, sorry for the lack of the video output. It's just been kind of busy in my world. If you have any questions, just let's talk about it. So leave a comment below. And then the other thing too is I said it earlier. I said again, I owe you guys some videos on this because it does sound really cool. I want to do a video on just setting it up. What I think I'm going to do as soon as this session is done, in my world, as soon as the client approves all the mixes, I think I'm just going to nuke it and just bring it back to factory. And, we'll do a firmware update from nuked, because I don't really have anything on there that I can't get right back to. So why not bring it back to factory? But again, I'm having to factory reset this thing, and I've only had it for a year. It's like, a little quirky on the electrical side of it. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching as always. If you have any questions about the H9, I'm always obviously looking for YouTube content. So, just drop a comment below and say, hey man, how does this work? I'd be glad to get into that. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching as always. Thanks for stopping by. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.